In today's video, we're going to be having a conversation about both of the Mirandus AMAs that have happened with Michael McCarthy over the past couple of weeks. There's been some really good information dropped, and so I want to cover the highlights of the info that I thought was valuable. The first interview happened on Chain Gaming's channel, and that was a 2-hour-long AMA packed full of information. And so most of this is going to come from that AMA. As the other AMA on the Paul Barron network, he talked about more intro beginner Mirandus information. So if you don't know a whole lot about Mirandus, then that's a perfect AMA to go watch and kind of learn what the game's about. However, if you haven't watched the on-chain gaming one and you're really into Mirandus, you really should go watch it so that you can get everything from McCarthy and from Jake. Now, before we get too far into the video, I first want to introduce myself if you haven't met me yet. So my name's Jake, and I make speculative yet very informative content on the blockchain MMO Mirandus. And I do this by taking all the information that we've learned so far and breaking it down into small, digestible videos like this one for you guys to watch. So if you're looking for consistent Mirandus content and updates, then hit that subscribe button. I'd love to see you on this page again. If not, then I appreciate you stopping by, and I hope to see you again sometime. As always, you guys are smashing the like goals, and I really appreciate it. It's helping with the like to view ratio, and YouTube loves that stuff, so it's promoting it to more people. So if y'all wouldn't mind, hit the like button, because the goal is 60 likes again for this video. And what hitting these like goals does is it helps promote Mirandus content to more people, which is kind of the whole goal of this channel. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So there's a lot to talk about, and I've got some notes over here that I'm going to kind of be going off of. So sorry if I'm reading off here quite a bit, but I want to make sure that I cover everything because there was a lot of really good information, and we learned a lot from it. So the first section, pretty much most of it came from On-Chain Gaming's AMA with McCarthy. I kind of went through and took notes in chronological order, so if you follow my notes, it'll probably go along with the video pretty well. Now, both of the AMA videos kind of started off with some general overview, like what is Mirandus information. But towards the end, they get into player questions, and of course, you guys rock at asking questions and asking good questions, and so that's where we learn most of our information. So that's kind of where most of this comes from. The first point that I thought was worth noting was the fact that you will not need to be at your building, whether it be a tavern or a shop or anything like that, to actually sell an item, which I think is going to be super helpful. And you know, that's going to allow you to go out and still play Mirandus rather than just being a tavern owner or just being a shop owner and selling stuff to people all the time. That's also going to help people coming into the town, and if it's not staffed at that time, that business won't get business, and that player won't be able to get anyone's business, so you won't be able to actually do anything. So that kind of solves that, and it will make sure that, you know, people won't have to be in the shop all the time. The next topic I wanted to cover was bartering. So McCarthy talked about the idea that bartering will be everything. He thinks that most people will probably want Materium, but if I have a sword that you want really bad and I'm an adventurer coming to your shop, you can actually ask for my sword and Materium, or just my sword instead of Materium, instead of only paying in Materium. I think that that's pretty cool, and that also means that trading will, that's basically trading confirmed. I know that that was kind of assumed, but we hadn't really heard much talk on trading. So if you and I wanted to swap items, we haven't really heard about that. But I think that this pretty well confirms that there will be some sort of trading mechanism. Another thing that was talked about, and this was I think that this was in Paul's, actually. I think this was in the other AMA, but gold in Mirandus, if there is gold, is more than likely going to be, or could be, Gala, instead of it being an in-game database currency, which actually makes a lot more sense, because a database currency, it would be really hard to have conversions between that and an actual cryptocurrency that has worth. So that decision actually makes me really happy, and I hope that they stick with that. I think that that would be really cool. That way we could have Materium as the premium currency and also gold as the second currency. You know, there might be different situations for different currencies, and maybe gold you can melt it down, or I don't know. We're getting too speculative now. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about was McCarthy says that he wants a lot of utility tied to everything in Mirandus. And this was on the topic of, this is exciting, of nodes. He even alluded to the idea that nodes could be NPCs in Mirandus. Wouldn't that be sweet? So if you had a node, that means maybe you could put that NPC in your shop and then he could do some upkeep for you. Or maybe that NPC could go out and do things in the world of Mirandus. Like you could say, hey, I want you to go gather me X amount of certain ore from a certain dungeon. Now, I don't know exactly how that worked. That's super speculative because, what about monsters and things like that? But just the idea that an NPC could be a node, that makes the idea of a node way, way, way cooler. Now, that's not confirmed. That's just something that he was kind of spitballing, but he seemed very enthusiastic while he was talking about nodes. He'd also mentioned something about mobile, so being able to control things from your phone. So I don't know if that means that you would have to have a node to do something from your phone in the world of Mirandus. I kind of hope that's not the case, but maybe it's a deal where you can play mobile if you have a node. I'm really not sure. Also, on the same topic of nodes, he mentions that nodes would solve the lower latency times, because what's happening are the high latency times. What's happening is when people from, say, somewhere in the United States try to connect with someone on the opposite side of the world, let's say like Singapore, for instance, the latency times are getting pretty high. And that's because of the servers being in a place far away from Singapore, say if they're in the States. So what these global nodes would do, or what these nodes that players own would do, is help to reduce the latency times for those people in places super far away from where the set servers are. So McCarthy really, really acted like he loved the idea of nodes, and I feel like it's kind of obvious that there's going to be nodes in Mirandus, but yeah, he pretty much talked about how he'd really like to have them. Now, the next question is when Mirandus, and of course this question gets asked all the time, but there's some really good information in these past couple AMAs that, as far as the timeline goes for Mirandus. Now, I'm going to play this clip. Get hyped.
What's the timeline for that right now?
So this year has been about foundational tech, and game development goes very slow in the beginning, and then it just gets crazy fast. So once you build the foundational tech, you have something you can stand on. And what we wanted to do this year is be positive that we had an architecture that was going to support the vision. One world, you can, no matter where you log in the world, you can play. We want we want hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in the same zone. And it's not just people, you also have AI running creatures and bots. So, you stand up the foundational tech and you start to pound on that a little bit, and then you just extend the content. So it's our desire that next year we have quite a large number of zones and dungeons that players could do and explore. So I'd like to see us in beta, if you will, next year, towards the end of next year, is what I would like to see.
With that being said, he also talked about how he'd like to have a tavern game playable, or tavern games playable, by the end of this year.
The next play test or stress test we need your help with, and it would also show tavern games that you could jump into and play. So what you're seeing here is a list of taverns. These would be taverns that you guys actually own on chain. Maybe you could name them. Maybe the bigger the tavern, the more higher the stakes, the more players that could come in. Yeah, so the idea here, guys, is that there's several games to choose from. We've got a bunch of ideas. We'd be open to ideas from you guys as well. But simple games that you guys could play with your friends, and you could be betting the old stones or bones in the tavern. We think it'd be cool. And one of the games here is Three-Eyed Snake. So for everyone that was at the Galaverse at the end of last year, we played Three-Eyed Snake in the tavern a lot over quite a few pints of ale. It was a lot of fun for everyone. We thought we'd throw that in there. That might be an easy one to get up and running for everyone first. What you're seeing here is just a mock-up. It almost looks like a single-player game, but you can imagine you're rolling dice against 3, 4, 5, 6 of your friends in real time. This is kind of a fun one. Again, playing with just some different ideas throughout these games to give you guys more utility. And let's say it was a bit of a nautical game and you owned a boat or a dock or a seafarer. Could we give you a little bonus when you played? We've got cards like Cruel Fate and things like that, the Goblin Fortune. What if those provided you bonuses prior to you loading the game as well? So trying to give you guys as much utility as possible, and we think these are some kind of fun, quick ways to do it. Here's a fun one. What if we got checkers up and running, and instead of the regular pieces, we allowed you to use your Mirandus box characters? Maybe they could even do a little chop or attack of some kind and break the other opponent's pieces. It's fun to think of all these games, and I like the idea that they look physical, that they could be on a table and lit by firelight or by candle. And it's interesting to think that even if they were wooden pieces, what if you used materium to make the game come alive, almost like a spell being cast? And that's why things could move around the table in an interesting way.
So we're going to get Mirandus content a lot sooner than I think we really realize. Now, the full game of Mirandus, again, like he said, is a couple years out. But just the idea that we can just go and do things inside of Mirandus is super exciting, because that's what the community has really asked for. We want the game ASAP. Now, I'm in the boat. I'd rather them take their time and make sure the game rocks before that they throw it out and maybe people get upset because such and such happened. But yeah, it's cool to hear that we're going to get Mirandus content soon. On the topic of the Mirandus beta was the question on whether or not the beta will be play to earn. And that's a really great question. So McCarthy talks about how he wants to have kind of like a mock blockchain set up for a certain part of it. And this mock blockchain, it's not actually going to save the progress. It'll save progress for a certain period of time, but once the actual blockchain version takes over, then it's going to reset your progress. So you're not actually going to be able to keep anything that you earned, but you're still going to be able to play Mirandus and get better at Mirandus until it's actually time for the game to release. So I think that's a really cool idea. That's going to allow players to go into the game sooner, and that's also going to allow the team to test as much stuff as possible, because if something happens, there could be some game breaking bug if someone could duplicate some sort of rare item. So I'm all for this. I love that idea. On the same subject, he mentions SAO, and if you guys have watched my videos before, you've heard me mention or reference Sword Art Online several times.
I'll tell you something too, Jake. Like I don't see Mirandus. I'll tell you what my dream would be. A dream of mine would be for Mirandus that it doesn't have an end. It's not like, oh, yep, that last expansion was it. Mm-hmm. It's not. That's thinking in terms of a game. Mm-hmm. I like the idea that this is a world, and it's almost like like the James Webb Telescope. It's like we keep seeing further out and seeing more and more and more. My dream for Mirandus is that it keeps growing. It keeps growing, and not just in size, in functionality, and it becomes a world that people can play in and escape to and live in. Sword Art Online, for Sword Art Online fans out there, there was that whole segment where it just gets kind of lost in that world. And
This is, I was thinking about this today. This is a little bit off topic, but hear me out. Okay, so the Minotaur King is supposed to be the boss of Mirandus, right? Well, the first boss of, these are SAO spoilers for like the next 30 seconds to 45 seconds. So if you plan on watching it, I guess skip these 30 to 45 seconds. If not, then I'm going to talk about it because I think it's kind of cool. So one of the first bosses in Sword Art Online, in the Tower of Sword Art Online, is a Minotaur-looking boss. I think his name's the Gleamy Eyes or the Gleamy Eyes or something like that. So that guy's a Minotaur-looking creature. What if the Minotaur King is the first in line of a long list of in-game 1-of-1 bosses that once one is beat, the next one comes out somewhere? Wouldn't that be sweet? I mean, and I think that that's probably what they have planned anyway, but just putting it in the context of SAO, I don't know, that just made me even more excited to kill the Minotaur King, because I guarantee y'all I'm gonna be on the team that kills the king. He also mentions certain bosses or certain caves appearing only at certain times.
Imagine there's one time of year, one full moon or a shooting star that has to be overhead, and only then does a mountain part or a door open that gives you access to a dungeon no one knew existed. Yeah. I don't think that player is going to run to Planet Internet and be like, oh, hey, everyone, come check out this thing. They're probably going to tell their guild, maybe a few of their friends, like, I figured out the secret, So we want the world to be full of secrets. But if a player shares it, that's up to them. That's up to them.
Again, I love that idea. I love super rare things that only come at certain specific times, and past those times, maybe you don't get them again, or maybe you never get them again. I think that having event bosses would be so cool. The next topic of conversation was deeds and how they will be first come, first serve at the very beginning of the game, because since they're trying to get the game to us ASAP, they can only make a certain amount of playable game, right? So if we start off in Narrow's Landing, there's only going to be a certain number of deed spots available. So they can't really ensure that everyone's going to have a deed spot available in the beginning, or else that would be a cluster. That's just not a thing. So again, deeds will be first come, first serve at the very beginning. And that'll be really interesting to see that land rush. Everyone's just going to take off sprinting in a certain direction, get teams and just go. Because, it may come down to if your team can beat these certain monsters in this area first, then you guys get to put down your town. Or then you get to put down your outpost or hamlet or outpost or something like that. So I think that that's going to be so much fun. That's going to be a huge adrenaline rush. So I was talking to somebody else about this. I think that the rights to put your deed down are going to be worth a lot, because in the very beginning, if there's only 5 to 10 town spots or outpost spots available, all those other outposts and towns and hamlets and whatnot won't be able to be play to earn because there's no spot available for them. So if you and your team get to place down an outpost first, maybe that outpost could be worth, 10 grand or whatever, but maybe the spot that outpost is on is worth another 10 grand. Just the rights to put your outpost down there. And I don't know if there's a way to make sure that if you sell that spot to somebody else that, you don't get scammed. I don't know. I just like the idea of, again, scarcity and that just the rights to put your deed down in that spot. I think that's super cool. And the next topic of conversation is tavern games. And I know I've already touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to go a little bit more into detail. So if you guys haven't played Sea of Thieves before, it looks super similar to the one of the games inside of the tavern. So I think that that's kind of neat. It's a cool reference. I also really like the idea that taverns plan on having leaderboards. Everyone loves a good leaderboard. And the thought or the idea that Legends Reborn could be in Mirandus as a tavern game, and that's not confirmed, by the way. That's just something that On-Chain Gaming, that Jake was talking about. but McCarthy didn't shoot it down. They kind of went with the conversation, and I think that that's kind of been a question for a long time, or a request for a long time, because the Legends Reborn team told Jake from On-Chain Gaming that they would like to have their game in the tavern. How sweet would that be? So then there could be leaderboards for Legends Reborn and Mirandus as a tavern game. And then maybe people who are playing can wager certain amounts of Materium or certain amounts of gold, or maybe even weapons or armor to the winner. That sounds like so much fun, and it makes you actually want to play tavern games. As far as the taverns that are hosting these tavern games, he also mentioned that it's very possible that tavern owners will get a portion of the games that are played. So if 10 Materium is wagered, maybe 8 goes to the winner and 2 goes to the tavern owner. I don't really know how that's going to work out, but he did mention that. He also talked about maybe in the beginning, for the more NFTs you have, the more items you get for these tavern games. And I don't know any of the tavern games very well, so I can't put that into a scenario. I just know that he had talked about the more items you have, the more stuff you'll have for tavern games. This next part I really enjoyed listening to, because this is a lot of new information. So he talks about dragon familiars, and he talks about how masteries are going to be, or could be, affected by your dragon familiar. So maybe I really don't know. Maybe they can speed up masteries some sort of way. Maybe if you can, and this is super speculative here, but maybe you can choose what kind of dragon you have based on some sort of variable. And then depending on the type of dragon you have, that can change how fast a mastery of a certain matching type goes. I don't know. That's super speculative. Also said that these dragons will be able to occasionally, or he liked the idea that these dragons could throw out a fireball mid-battle sometimes. Not as much so that you can rely on it, but there's always a possibility of them shooting a fireball and helping you mid-battle. That's fun, and it helps the dragon to be a little bit more of an asset rather than just, a conversation piece. Now this next part is actually kind of huge information, and it kind of debunks a lot of the speculation that I had on some of the Vox characters, because there are different animal Vox characters, and at first I thought that maybe for the Hawk Voxes, I thought that maybe those were going to be familiars as well, and those Hawk Voxes would help to buff your Hawk familiars. But McCarthy says there is no talk of other familiars right now. So that means that dragons will be the only familiars for a long time, or for a certain period of time. And yeah, that's that. So none of the Vox characters are familiars besides the dragons. So I have no idea what those are for. Maybe increased drop rates, increased rarity chance of drop rates. I have no idea. He also talks about how some of these dragons, maybe you could do evil stuff with them too. And I don't know if this is like burning dragons or what he's referring to here, but he says maybe you could use the skin of dragon familiars, of 3 dragon familiars, to make a 1-of-1 evil scepter if you had the recipe for the scepter. Wouldn't that be like, I don't know, that just sounds so much fun. That sounds like so much fun, being able to kind of choose what kind of character, maybe good or evil, or choose which direction you want your exemplar to go down, and maybe that opens up certain doors in the long run. The next topic of conversation was privileges, and we've already talked about this in Discord several times, and I'm pretty sure it's been confirmed before, but he talks about the ability to privilege out your building to other people, meaning you could give me as a shop owner could give you, an ally, a key to my building to give you privileges to maybe craft something or to mess with the inventory, and I'm sure there's probably going to be certain levels of keys as well, because if I wanted somebody to just go and craft, or have the ability to go and craft something rather than touch the inventory, I'd really have to trust somebody if I'm giving them a key to my building's inventory. So I don't know exactly how that's going to work, but there will be keys that can be given out. Next topic of conversation was inventory and how deeds are going to play a huge role in increasing your inventory space. Because if you don't have a deed and you only have yourself and no external storage, you're going to kind of struggle with inventory. You're only left with what you on your character has to actually do anything with the items in your inventory. So you have to be really, really careful of all the things that you pick up, and you're gonna have to ally with somebody or pay somebody to store some of your items in their house or in their storage facilities. I think that makes sense. That's much like real life. He says he really doesn't want to have unlimited inventory. And then he kind of touches on MetaMask a little bit, or just external wallets, and how he doesn't want an external wallet to serve as an unlimited inventory bank. So it'll be interesting to see how they actually get around that, because they didn't say anything concrete. So we'll kind of see how that works out. Then they start talking about something fun. So one of my buddies, Abstract, talked about or asked about PvP, and Abstract loves PvP, so this was perfect, and I'm sure he loved this answer. So McCarthy mentions that, well, first of all, there's not going to be PvP in outside of towns in Mirandus. Like, that's not going to be a thing. I can't go up to you and kill you without any warning or without any smart contract or anything like that. I can't just go and kill you, just like you can't just come and kill me. But he did say that he cannot get out of his head the idea of arenas, and how maybe 3 players can enter an arena with another 3 players, and they all 6 fight to the death, and the losers maybe have everything burned. Maybe they lose everything. The winners maybe get their gear, but the losers lose. When I say everything, I'm talking their exemplar and their exemplar soul as well. Not just like dying and go to the graveyard or going to the cemetery. I'm talking like erase their exemplar. It's gone. So that's very, very harsh. And what would people actually pay to see those fights? I think that would be a lot of fun, because that's going to, maybe there's 2 super high level exemplars that are well known in the land, 2 gladiators that are going up against each other. Like, everyone's going to want to watch that, because there's huge, like, $1,000 stakes on the line. And maybe they're even using Mirandus Vox as their to complement their exemplars. So if they're using Vox to complement their exemplars, maybe they also lose their Vox, and then we're really talking about like several $1,000s there. And the last topic that I thought was worth covering, and this kind of goes back to what I was mentioning earlier, masteries being super important, is that he says that masteries could potentially increase the number of items that get dropped when you harvest a certain item, or maybe mastery could increase the rarity of the item that gets dropped, or maybe like increases the rarity or the % chance of getting something when harvested, or I don't know. He keeps mentioning masteries, and so I'm really excited to see a full mastery tree and how that will affect gameplay. And I hope that he kind of keeps things secret so that we don't see the whole mastery tree when it comes out. Maybe we only see 2 options, and then further down the road in 6 months, we hear of someone who's just constantly getting good drops, and we have to try to figure out how to get to that mastery. That adds a whole other mysterious go and find it aspect to Mirandus, which is going to be full of those to begin with. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. That's all that I have marked down. So if you guys have anything that I missed that you thought was super important, put it in the comments below, and I will I'll make sure to add that in the next video, because there was a lot of really, really good information dropped. Hopefully I covered most of it. Hopefully it made sense. I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace, guys.